Alright, so what's going on, guys? So today we're going to be coloring a piece of comic book artwork. So this is just the inked work. It's the image of William Shakespeare. I know you don't automatically associate William Shakespeare with comics, but that's the piece of line work that we're going to be using today. Alright, we're going to use a very simple method. There are other methods where you can actually separate the line work, so you can color the lines. If you want to see that, then have a look at my more in-depth tutorial of coloring comic artwork. But this is just a very quick way of doing it, but also a very accurate way. Alright, so we start off by bringing in our line work, which we've already done here, so we can see our image. As you can see, the background is locked because it's a default that happens when you bring in your image into Photoshop. So we're going to unlock that just by clicking on the little padlock layer. We're going to change the option of this layer to multiply. And what that'll allow us to be able to see what we do beneath that layer, so it's not a destructive method that we're using. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to click and drag that to the bottom. Now it's always good to name your layers, because if you end up having 50 layers and they're named layers 1 to 50, you won't know what is on each layer. So let's rename this simply by double clicking on the text, and we're just going to type in line work, or lines, it's fine. Layer 1, which we've pulled to the bottom, is going to become our background, so we're going to just call that background. Now with the background layer selected, we're going to go to our paint bucket fill tool. Now that might be hidden behind your gradient tool, so it might look like that. If that is the case, simply click your left mouse button and hold it down and select the paint bucket tool. Select the color that you want to have as your background color. If you want to change the color, then you could either go up here to color and change the hue by adjusting the slider and then moving the little circle to decide on which color you want to go with. Right, so we're going to go with this blue color, and you're happy with that, click, and as you can see on the thumbnail is now blue to represent what is happening on that layer. Okay, cool, so we've got our background colored. We're going to then create another layer, which is going to act as our block colors. Right, so just the solid colors which will be dependent upon the area that you're coloring on your image. For that, we're going to go to our paintbrush tool. We're going to make some adjustments to our paintbrush by right clicking on our mouse, and we are going to, you may be on the general brush. If that is the case, then we're going to change the hardness to 100%, and the size is going to be adjusted dependent on your image. So if you hover your cursor over your actual image, then you can see how much the brush size is increasing by. If you can't see that, then you may have your cap locks on, so just double check that, because if you have your cap locks on, then you're going to have this crosshair. So just click off of cap locks, and then you'll be able to see your brush size. Next stage is, let's rename that layer. Again, good layer management, so we're going to name this block colors. We're then going to select a color for a particular part of the image. So if I start by coloring the face, I'll select a Caucasian skin tone, roughly around here. Then proceed to color. Now, the reason why we selected a hard edge brush, let's change it. We've got our opacity set to 73%. Let's change that to 100%. The reason why we selected a hard edge brush is because we want to fill the colors solidly. If our hardness was set to 0%, then the edges of our brush would be feathered, so it would be like that. So that's perfectly fine if we're doing shading, but we're not. We're doing our block colors, so we want the hardness set to 100%. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and color this part of the image, so I'll speed this up. Okay, good. So now we've got our block colors roughly put in. So of course this is done quite roughly just because it's a demonstration, just so you guys get an idea. The next stage is for us to add in our shadows or our areas of shade. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to rename that like dark colors, and we're going to decide on where our shadows are going to fall. So usually if you get a piece of artwork, line work, then the artists would have defined where the light source would be on your image, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you may just get the dead lines, which are just lines without any kind of varying thickness, and in that instance you're going to need to decide on a light source yourself, dependent on the image that you're working with. So for this image we've got a light source quite defined, so we're going to go ahead and mask out our areas that we want to have in shadow. So we can use the lasso tool to do that by selecting the lasso tool and simply clicking and drawing out the areas that we want to be in shadow. Now when we want to add to that selection, if we hold down the shift key, then you can see your cursor gets a little plus. If we want to take away from that, we just click the alt key and you see you get a little minus. So let's go and hold the shift key and add in some more areas. Okay, so as you would have noticed, I've only masked off the darker areas for the skin as it is, and that's because we're going to have to find a color, a variation of the skin tone, which is a darker variation. So it wouldn't make sense selecting the hair or the tunic, simply because the darker variations of those colors won't be the same as the dark variations for the skin. So to find a darker variation of that color, if we hold down the alt key and click anywhere on our image, or we can even click and drag, then you can see we get a sample of the color. So anytime you've lost the color and you haven't saved it to swatches, you can just simply do that to find that color. Now I'm going to find a dark variation of this color. Now you can warm that up slightly by adding a little more red to it if you choose, but you don't have to. Now you can, dependent on the type of image that you're using and dependent on the style that you want to go for, you can leave your brush at 100% hardness. So if we were to do that and just increase the size of that brush and color that all in, just go to select and deselect, then you see you could get a perfectly good looking style and image by doing that. However, if you want to have a softer, more realistic image, then we're going to bring the hardness down and we're going to start from the edges and then slowly brush into the areas of shadow, and this will give us a softer, more realistic feel to our shadows. See, we can then go in just with the brush by itself and just kind of eyeball it. So any little areas that you've missed, you can then go in and add to that. Now we can do the same for the rest of our image. Again, I'll speed this part up. Alright, good. So now we've got our dark variations added into our image. We can finish up by adding a layer for the highlights. So when rendering, one of the key things you need to think about is how light interacts with the material that you're working with, or that you're trying to render. So for example here, and eyes or glass, it will be far more reflective than a material like cotton, right? And this is the type of thing that you need to be thinking about. So I've created another layer here, which is going to be our light colors, and I'm going to do the same thing what I've done for the darker colors, but with lighter colors, right? So for example, with the hair, selected a variation of that, and I'm going to make a lighter variation, again thinking about the light source. They're going to just add in some highlights. Now you don't want to overdo, because you don't want it to start looking a bit crazy. Yep, so just picking out specific areas throughout. And I'm going to go ahead and do that with the rest of the image and speed up the process. And there we have it. A really simple method and quick method of coloring your line work.